Good evening, everyone. I am Kofi Annan, and welcome to another community meeting with the Social Justice Ministry of First Baptist Church Vienna. Sadly, again, we find ourselves on the heels of another mass shooting. This time it was Uvalde, Texas. The week before that, it was in Buffalo, New York. And even in between those two more publicized mass shootings, there have been several others, even smaller ones. We find ourselves in a situation where we just continue to have mass shootings over and over. So we wanted to have a conversation about this and to try to understand what are some of the causes and what are the hopefully what are some of the solutions, what are some of the things that have been proposed, why they've failed to make a difference so far. And so we just wanted to sit down and have a talk about this. And so we're going to kick this off with introductions one more time. So I'll pass it over to Sheree.
Hi, I'm Shireen Anand, Kofi's wife, and I am a member of the First Baptist Church of Vienna Social Justice Ministry.
I am Rashina Drong, resident millennial here and a member of the clergy here at First Baptist Church of Vienna.
I am Gloria Runyon. I am a member of First Baptist Church of Vienna and a member of the social justice community.
Awesome. So thanks again for joining us. Before we get started, we did want to call out the names of the victims from the Buffalo, New York shooting, as well as the Uvalde, Texas shooting, just as a way to honor them and to show some reverence, so that they don't just become numbers. We wanted, out of respect, we wanted to call out their names. So Gloria, if you will.
Sure. Aaron Salter, Ruth Whitfield, Roberta Drury, Pearl Young, Catherine Massey, Marcus Morrison, Celestine Chaney, Geraldine Talley, Andre McNeil, Haywood Patterson, Makina Lee Elrod, Layla Salazar, Miranda Mathis, Nevaeh Bravo, Jose Manuel Flores Jr., Javier Lopez, Tess Maria Mata, Rogelio Torres, Eliana Amia Garcia, Eliana Torres, Annabelle Guadalupe Ramirez, Jackie Cazares, Elzina Garcia, Jazz Camilio Lovina, Mata Juliana Rodriguez, Jalea Nicole Solgero, Irma Garcia, Avon Marilia, Amiria Joe Lazar, Alexandra Nania Rubio, Alethea Ramirez.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, it's sometimes it might be easy to forget that, with all the numbers that gets thrown out, and it becomes just another large number of people killed. We wanted to make sure that we don't forget that these are people, and these are lives, and these are families that are being torn apart every time that we see these things happen. So we cannot just forget about that. Thank you for calling those names out, Gloria. But I guess the first question out to the panel is just putting things into context. Why do you feel like we keep having these mass shootings? And I just look back at my notes, and there were actually 16 mass shootings just in the 10 days between the Buffalo shooting and the Uvalde, Texas shooting. So we didn't hear about the other 16 because the numbers, they didn't grab enough attention to make national media. But this is a tremendous problem, and so why do you think we keep finding ourselves in these situations?
We are we love our guns in America. We love the Second Amendment right to bear arms. And I think that there is a tremendous amount of mental gymnastics that has to take place through for our legislators to really bring about change. And nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to upset the gun lobby. Nobody wants to upset their campaign donors or things like that. And I think that that's a big part of the problem is that there's too much money involved in weapons to really make real change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. The legislation and changing the gun laws, and why is it happening? I don't know. We could blame social media. We could blame the climate we're in with the past president we had, and freedom then to do this because that's what he proposed in many ways. But then why is it this seemingly it's the age group between 18 and 21, white males doing this? What's that about? The ease of getting A15 and why do you need to have an A15? None of that makes sense to me. And it is, as Rashina said, that no one makes to make the law because NRA gives them money and supports their campaign. So the reason this is happening, I don't know. I say social media has a lot to not cause it, but in any way allow it to happen because I don't know where's the dark web, I don't know what you call it, but you can see these messages and get people stirred up. And I just remember when I was working as administrator, there was a Pizza Hut near my job. Someone came up from some other state because they thought to shoot and rescue a child predator, I think it was called, because they thought this Pizza Hut was hiding child predators. Complete falsehood. But he came prepared to shoot. And then when he got there, he found out that was completely false. But those kind of things, and why people get caught up in that kind of message, I don't know. I don't know.
And I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. To Rashina's point, legislation, to Gloria's point, social media. I also think there's a mental health element to this as well. And I think it's kind of ingrained in this culture here in America. So I think it's a culmination of different things. So I don't think there's like one solution. I think that it has to be tackled from multiple angles.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the country. Here in Vienna was country at one point. And I grew up around guns. I mean, the shotgun, that's how you go. You did hunting, you hunt your deer. And I knew where the gun was, I knew where the bullets were, knew how to load, I knew how to shoot. But that was it. You were shooting animals for your for your livelihood. You weren't using A15. Why do you need this weapon? And that's what I think we need to have a stop to. These weapons make no sense. And I think, and that's what I think our legislators are not doing anything about it because of big money.
I completely agree. I don't think the general public needs access to assault rifles. I don't know why anyone would need that. You're not going to shoot deer, a mass amount of deer at one time.
Right.
So that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I know. Okay, let's dig more into the legislative piece because like you all mentioned, there's a lot of different angles that we need to tackle this issue. But the legislative piece, I think, is probably like the one that gives people the most frustration because that's the one that seems like it's in a lot of cases actually going the other direction. Like there's a lot of little positive, more restrictive legislation being passed at state levels, but there's just as many pieces of legislation that are making it easier for people to get guns or easy to carry guns or whatnot. And so there's just seems like a balance of going on that's kind of going around statewide. Nothing is happening at the federal level because that's just our federal government's just stuck. But there is stuff happening at the state level. But so if we, my question, and here's where I'm a little skeptical. I'll admit I'm a little skeptical as to like what legislation would do to prevent something like these mass shootings, right? So we say that okay, well, you have to do background checks, right? I'm for background checks. I think it makes sense. But in a situation where the person doesn't have a criminal record, like the situation in Uvalde, like that would necessarily have stopped them, right? And I agree that nobody needs an AR-15, right? Like these are military grade weapons. But I feel like the person who was out to kill, right? I mean, if someone, I hate to be so graphic, but someone shoots their grandmother, right, and then goes to target babies, that person, I don't know what law is get in the way of that. Like, someone
No,
is that demented. How do you legislate? And I guess the part of it too, which maybe this goes up into the mental health side of it, but I feel like there's enough that person is suicidal in a lot of cases. A lot of these people that commit these things are suicidal, so they aren't afraid of laws because they're ready to die, right? They're ready to they're doing this act as a last hurrah type of thing. So how do you legislate away the will for someone to commit someone something like this? And can't they just get their gun some other way? If I don't know. I might be playing devil's advocate here, but I do struggle with that thought.
no, I agree. I was talking to a friend just a couple days ago, saying, the I think the legislation that's kind of being held up in Congress right now is pertaining to background checks and trying to make access to guns harder. But in this case, a background check
Mm-hmm.
um, wouldn't have prevented this. And a lot of people who are pro guns, they would argue, if a person is just evil, they're going to find a way to do whatever, carry out whatever it is that they want to carry out. But
Mhm.
I think that the government owes it to the citizens to do everything in their power to try to
Mm-hmm.
make it harder. Like there should
Mm-hmm.
not be access to these weapons. So I don't,
Yeah.
you can't prevent, a lot of things from happening, or these things from happening. You can't fully prevent. There's nothing that's 100% guaranteed. But I think that the government has a responsibility
To try,
to,
Right,
To
to
try.
try.
yeah,
Yeah.
right?
to try.
It's almost like speeding, right? Like
Right.
we know people are gonna speed, but we gotta have speed
Right,
limits, right?
Yeah.
right.
Well,
And
like they were saying before, like when the terrorists had something in their shoe to get on the plane, what do we start doing? Checking all shoes.
Mm-hmm.
When
Hmm.
things happen, you made changes.
Right.
So get these assault weapons off the market. Don't sell them. Destroy them. So you can't get them. Why would an 18-year-old need that? So you have an age limit, just like you have an age limit on voting. Why can't you have an age limit on that? And a background check. I think there's lots of things to do. I know there's this group of mothers against this, and we protest and do all those kinds of things. Nothing changes. So it has to be at the legislative level. There
Right.
has to be some sort of prevention and not allowing this to happen by not selling them. And I don't know how you, I don't know. And we go back to mental health. Yeah, but then when you don't allow the money, like in Texas, you don't put the funds out there for that kind of thing to take place, then we really aren't doing anything at all. So we say one thing in legislation and then we don't support it with action.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big issue. Big issue.
yeah,
And then arming teachers. I mean, I have to speak on this one. In the classroom, I think retired in 2013 or 14, I'm not sure. We practice these drills.
Mm.
It is horrendous to have little kids have lockdowns, sitting in the dark and not speak and hiding. And they know why they're doing that. My last year there was at the high school, doing a lockdown, high school seniors doing a lockdown, sitting in my office, completely dark, and they were scared, even if it was just a practice. But sitting there in the dark, not knowing what's going on the outside, and I'm there protecting them. If I had to have a gun, no one's protecting them, and they would have been even more frightened. So that's completely ridiculous. Having teachers armed, having all the things that Texas, what's his name, Ted Cruz is proposing makes no sense at all. Makes no sense. Of locking down doors and having everyone armed, and it's anything to satisfy some sort of ideas that puts it on somebody else and not on the legislation. Put it on them and not on the legislation. Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so someone, forget who was, brought up the cultural issue. Is there a cultural issue, and is that fixable? Like, putting legislation aside, like we can't legislate culture, but is that a separate entity of itself, or is that just part of, like, I don't know, because it does seem like you could try to legislate certain things, but does America itself have a cultural difference in how we value life? Let's let what it is, right? So we talk about mass shootings, right? But the truth is, there are like 45,000 murders in America every year, right? Which is per capita one of the most violent countries in the world. So is this mass shooting just one manifestation of a larger cultural issue?
I would say so. I think we like to pride ourselves in America on, how progressive we are, how free we are. But I think culturally there's just a sense of entitlement
Mm-hmm.
um, in America, and I won't even say it's just one particular culture, but I think just it's ingrained in who America is as a nation. We feel entitled to our freedom. And so we have all of this freedom, and this is what all of this freedom has gotten us. Um, so I think that there is the entitlement is a part of it. I think that because this happens so often, we're becoming
Desensitized.
Yeah.
desensitized
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
to it. And it's like, oh, it's just another day in
Mm-hmm.
America. It's just,
Hmm.
something else that happens. And I think that that's a larger part of it because a lot of other countries who you would compare America to don't have not this type of problem. I'm sure they have other things, and maybe they're not as free as us, but they don't have children dying in
Mm-hmm.
schools from
Hmm.
mass shootings.
Yeah, and I agree. It's like, to your point, it's kind of like normal. It becomes normal. Like it happened. There's a bunch
Statistics.
of attention for maybe a week, if that. And then you don't hear about it anymore. Because I was actually talking to Kofi when I realized that they had stopped talking about Buffalo. Oh, did they stop talking about Buffalo already? And kind of moved on to the next thing. And it's just becoming normal, and that's not a good feeling. But I just feel like that's kind of the way it is. It's feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a vicious cycle. I think I
Hmm.
saw this graphic. There's a mass shooting. Everybody is all upset about it. We are deeply saddened. There's thoughts and prayers, and
Mhm.
then there is, you know,
I
nothing.
think I saw that graphic. Yeah, yeah. It just kind of goes back
Yeah.
around, and we forget. We go back to the next thing.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks later, something else happens, and we're all up in arms again. Yeah, no. Just to the point of the desensitization. I grew up in DC in the '90s, and it's still pretty violent now. But at the time, I didn't realize how violent DC was because I was in it.
Mm,
I was growing up in the middle of all this violence, and I myself lost two friends in middle school to gun violence in middle school. Um, and it wasn't at the school, but it was, they were still middle school kids, and we kind of get caught up in the drug game. And like that type of stuff is traumatic, but when you're in the middle of the trauma, you don't even realize you're being traumatized. It wasn't until I actually left DC, joined the military, and moved away from, I went out to Hawaii and then realized, like, nobody got shot today. Like,
Hmm.
mm,
it might sound crazy, but like when you're in the middle of something, you don't realize it. And I could see
yeah.
that happening on like a larger scale with America itself, where people don't even realize just how nuts all this violence is because we're in it, as a country.
Mhm.
So. I don't know what you do about to 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 combat that, but it's definitely some. It's dangerous when you become desensitized to like innocent people in a grocery store or elementary
Mm.
school getting killed. Like that is I can't imagine anything more unless outside of like war zones. I
Right.
can't
Right.
imagine something more dangerous than getting desensitized to that.
Yeah, it's. I think for me, it just resonates more with me when I had a friend, a college friend, and we were close. We, sang together. We went out to eat together. We hung out. We did ministry together, and he died in the post nightclub shooting.
Mm.
Mm,
Mm.
So, and like, it was like, just one day we're joking about something, and then like he's dead because somebody has an AR-15 and just
Mm.
wants to unload their frustration on innocent people. This Uvalde shooting hit different for me because I have a son who's 7,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I cannot imagine my kid being in school and having to pretend he's dead so that he doesn't get shot. To have the presence of mind to do that
Mm.
as a little person. I remember when I was probably about 9 or 10, I was at my a relative's house, and somebody just drove by the house, started shooting, and I was like scared, scared.
mm,
And I was outside, so I got hid behind a car. But to have our children have to figure out how to stay alive in a situation like that, I like it. It just I don't think I could become desensitized to it, and I
Mm.
think that um, part of the way to combat that is, we don't. It has to happen, close to your, it has to be in your backyard, or it has to happen to you for a lot of people to really like get that this is not okay.
mm,
Um,
Yeah,
mm.
maybe we need to hear these stories.
Mm.
And maybe not just once, but several times about that child trying to pretend that they're dead. And
Mm.
so, what these kids, so it's put out there, and each one has a story, and hearing those stories repeatedly, maybe that's how to make people feel. I was remembering when the Sandy Hook, my little kids, we were coming to the Christmas assembly, and these little 5-year-olds and first graders were wearing their little halos on their heads, and they were singing Christmas songs because my school celebrated authentic Christmas, and they're watching it. When they're watching into this assembly, those kids in Sandy Hook were getting killed. I will
Mm.
never forget that. And how can and so maybe telling the stories that someone the stories about being scared about someone remembering how this happened. Maybe if we do that repeatedly and repeatedly, people will understand it's real and it's not just something that's going to go away because it's still there. And these kids, when they leave school, it's still there for them, and it'll be there for them for a long time.
right. And I think, too, to Kofi's point, we don't realize, like, even though it's not happening to us directly, or it's not affecting all of us directly, we are still being traumatized by this this violence that's
Yeah,
going on. Like, and we don't even know what the ramifications of this could be in the future.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
You know what? I think did I cut you off? I'm sorry.
no, 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 you're fine.
And I'm just thinking about this now, but in a way, I feel like the desensitization of it is almost like an automatic response your body does to protect you,
Mm.
because it's like if you live in that trauma, it could eat you up, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So I think for some people, it's just a way to help them move on in life, good or bad. I think that's just my like an automatic response in some people's way of coping. It's just like a coping mechanism to just kind of
Mhm.
block it out and act like, well, we're just gonna move on, because it is crazy. It is
Yeah.
traumatic that we it's amazing what the human being, a human brain can go through. And I'll take another cool side story here that might seem unrelated, but I see this. I see the parallels. I remember listening to some news story one time about a war in Iraq. I served there one time, and I was listening to this reporter tell a story um, about how he was trying to meet a source for a story, and the source was called him up, was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so late. I could, there was a VBID in downtown, and but the person was so desensitized, I guess, to the fact that this bomb just went off, that he was actually apologizing for being late. Like, not like traffic was bad late, like you just witness, you know what I'm saying? So it's crazy how it's just crazy what the human mind is capable of doing in bad situations. But we shouldn't stop, and we should stop and pause and recognize that this is still a really bad situation.
Right.
Like we shouldn't feel like we have to just move on from this stuff, and I think that's where we're going. But I think that's a really dangerous path as a country. So
I agree, but we can't. Like you have to like think these are not just numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
We read off those names. These are people who had families and people who love them, and I just feel like the government is really just. I mean, it's failing the American people.
yeah,
And whether you're right wing or left wing, like it doesn't matter. Like the government as a whole is failing the American people because this this happens too often, and it's not like we don't hear about them all the time, so it feels like it's an outlier. These are outlier events, but they're not. Like this is a very common problem, and when you talk to people from other developed countries about America and culture and the violence and all of that, like we're, for lack of a better term, we're the weirdos. Like we're
yeah,
the
we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a little stat to back up that weirdos part. We have over 400 million guns in America. We have more guns than people, and that is actually more than the next 25 countries combined have less guns than we do. Like this, because as I'm saying, like it become like mass shootings are just one manifestation of this. There's really just a gun problem in general. You know,
Yeah.
we have to definitely tackle the mass shootings, but um, especially for Black communities, like we also need to make sure that we don't just think about this as a mass shooting problem,
right.
because our kids, especially our young men, are getting slaughtered every day too, at a much more disproportionate rate. So we need to just tackle this and look at this as a gun
That's a
problem
gun
in
problem. Yeah.
general. And believe it or not, all these mass shootings and all this attention, the number of guns getting produced every year is increasing. So last year they set a record for the number of guns. So that the people making money off of this are still making even more money despite all of the craziness that's going on. So um, want to pivot real quick to talk about the Second Amendment. Any constitutional attorneys in the building?
Any constitutional
um,
attorneys?
Why?
not
That's
it.
it.
We should address that, because that's like the elephant in the room. I know there's been people who said, like, look, the problem is the Second Amendment. If these gun owners are latching to the Second Amendment as their reason for why they should be allowed to do whatever they want, buy whatever guns they want, well, maybe we should just fix that. That's the core of the problem. What do you guys think?
Again, it goes back to what we talked about in the last conversation. Um, we feel like the Constitution is like certain parts of the Constitution are etched in stone, and then we have amendments, and um, you know we make changes to the Constitution like that. That Bill of Rights thing is like really, it's got the nation in a chokehold. Like we do not
Don't you touch my Constitution? That was written by Jesus
don't
himself.
you touch it. It is sacred, and like some people revere it more than they revere the Bible or other sacred
Yeah.
texts. So I don't want to be the pessimist, but I don't foresee that ever changing. That Americans won't have the right to bear arms, because it is like one of the tenets that this country
Mhm.
was founded on is that you have the right to bear arms to protect yourself from a tyrannical government. I think is the,
Yeah.
the the word, and which is
But also said a rightly formed or a well-regulated militia is
militia.
supposed to
Yeah,
have
Yes,
these
right.
guns, not just anybody.
yes. And so, which is again to me is a little bit absurd, simply because um, if the government wanted to, be tyrannical and they wanted to kill us and make us bow down, like they have access. The AR-15 is not going to stop them.
Right.
Like take this F-15.
Yeah.
They have tanks and nuclear missiles and all of these things. So having a gun is not going to stop the government from being tyrants. It's just not. And then you get into the conversation. Well, where do we draw the line? Should we have access to the same to grenades and tanks too,
Mhm.
like to be able to buy those things? And so to me, that's just not a valid argument for me. Is we need these just in case the government goes rogue, because they're the government. They have
Yeah.
weapons.
We can invade.
That's
We can
right.
invade whole other countries.
Right.
You and your little
Yeah.
friends over there are not gonna
Yeah.
stop the government.
So I
Yeah.
don't I don't think that we'll ever not have the right to bear arms unless something really
Yeah. It's too ingrained. Yeah.
outlandish happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
go
Kofi,
ahead.
when you were in DC, did they then have a callback on weapons, and you could turn all your guns
Oh, the
in?
buyback program.
Yeah. Was that when you were there too? I'm not
I think
sure.
I've had that for a while. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
Was that effective?
no. Without citing any, you know what? I shouldn't say that because I don't really know for sure if there was ever like a dip in the violence once the buyback program happened or not. But I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I have any recollection of gun violence going down after these buyback programs. There's just too many guns out there, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Um,
Well,
so
one way to get rid of this is to vote out these people. So the next election, you vote them out, who are not these senators who are refusing to pass these amendments that the House passes. I mean,
yeah,
that's a solution because and what else are we going to do? Just, you know, I mean,
yeah.
I thought
Well,
about
so
that,
let's.
Gloria,
what?
but I have thoughts.
Rashina said she was gonna run the last time we talked.
There's this little group that I work on Fridays. It's called Power Lunch. It's only for an hour, and there are women who are running for office, at least in the state of Virginia, because Virginia's gone crazy. And they are pushing their point of view, and they're getting lots of support. And it's wonderful. So, Rasheen, if you want to do it, you have a group of women who'll be right behind you, supporting you.
I couldn't be a politician.
And that's what my daughter said. She could not be a politician. Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
could not be a
so
politician.
so just on the vote them out thing. So here's where I get really kind of sad, and because I'm really pessimistic about our current system actually producing food on this, right? Because we have a two-party system, even though 80 something percent of Americans believe in having gun reform, the quote unquote sensible gun reform, 80 something percent of people, right? It's a relatively safe thing to do. But the problem is that if you're on the right, why would you support that? Because everyone that's on the right is still going to vote for you, even if you don't support gun restrictions, right? It's not like they have. It's not like and the more further to the right you are, right, the more likely you are to win your primary. So the primary pushes people to the right, which pushes people to less gun restrictions. And so you're almost the system is set up to push the furthest the more extreme people into office, and so the more extreme positions just prevail. It's like, and so it's not like, even if you're a moderate Republican and you want gun reform, you're not going to vote for a Democrat. So you're going to be mad at this person who's voting, who's not voting, but you're still agree with them on the other 90% of the issues. So like the system is just not set up for compromise. And
You
that's
know,
just I
yeah.
don't know. Tell me
I
why
have
I'm
to take
wrong.
I have to take an optimistic point of view here.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't know what I would do. I think that there are Republicans who really would, in their closet, know what these right wings people are doing, and those who are strong Trump supporters. But they want power, and they would stay in that. So you get those people out. I mean, I think primary voting is extremely important. You can't not understand that that's how important that is. So try to do your best to get them out, and then you knock on doors. I mean, I believe in the power of vote. When I was growing up here in Virginia, during a massive resistance, I remember conversations at my house and around for paying your poll tax, for voting, getting people out. And it was small groups that made changes, small groups that integrated the public library, small groups that integrated the schools before the rest of Virginia did. So I believe in that kind of push. And so I have to be optimistic that we can make these changes and just do it. And I do believe that there are when there are Republicans who are not really, who want what's best. And I've seen Republicans change. I think there was a group of women who were down protesting recently because she said, I was a Republican, but there's no way I'm going to vote Republican anymore because they aren't doing anything. So I have to be optimistic. And maybe it's because otherwise, what would I do, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I agree that we should be optimistic. And I talked a little bit about this the last time. I feel like the problem with the government is these people have a lot of money funneled into their campaign. So it's really hard if you're not an incumbent already to get that support um, from a grassroots perspective. It's hard to get that support when you want to run against an incumbent and somebody who's been in office for decades. And so I feel like yes, we should try to vote these people out, but I feel like a big part of voting them out is not letting them stay in there so long in the first, like not letting them legally be able to be voted in and continue to be voted in for decade after decade after decade. Um,
Yeah.
but again,
Yeah, term limits.
Yeah.
Term limits.
Agree.
Yeah, yeah.
so yes, we should, I believe voting, there is power in voting, but I also believe that the two-party system is broken. And I believe that these people are not going to, they want to hang on to this power. And I'm wondering why they want to hang on to the power when they're not using that power to help the people. That like so that I guess that's my frustration with our current political system. Do I still vote, and I still make myself educated on the issues and things like that. But those are things that I can't change on my own. That I can voice this opinion, but Congress is not going to vote against themselves to not be able to have that power.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It does, I guess, take it. I was thinking of an educated voter. I think that, I don't know who's running against Connolly. Somebody is. And I'm thinking, why would you do that now? That's not the time to do that. Only because he's done a good job. He's been in there a while. And you running against him, that's going to split up the vote. And then we're going to get more of these Republicans. So
But
I think, yeah,
that goes back to Kofi's point. This
that's right.
two-party system.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So, you just, I don't know. I just believe getting out there and talking and registering people and knocking on doors and calling people. I guess that's what I'm used to doing. And I think that's the only thing we can, hopefully there would be some change. But then that's why I don't want to be a pessimist. I have to keep being an optimist.
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully me and Rashida are wrong, and we just get proven wrong, and like, okay,
I would love to be
I would
wrong.
love to be wrong. Yes, I would love to be wrong on this. Um, let's see. So we talked a little bit about social media. Not to beat that dead horse too much, but is there anything we've seen, like in the Buffalo shooting? We've seen in the past where these folks are like, streaming their acts on social media. Does the media in general have a role to play in this? Like, by highlighting this, or by allowing this to be getting on social media so easily, or letting things build up without allowing or triggering some kind of law enforcement intervention, before it gets too long. A lot of these people leave little breadcrumbs on social media as to like what they plan on doing, or things like that. Is media, social media, mass media, do they have a role to play in the solution?
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
I mean,
Really, Shireen?
right. I mean, especially in some of these scenarios, you've seen copycats where they're looking at what has happened in other places, like incidents that have happened, and looking at how they can play those things out. So I definitely think the media, social media, has a big role in these things happening.
I agree. I think that I'm a child of social media. Like I've been like when Facebook was the Facebook, like back in 2004. So I've been on social media. So I'm a big advocate for social media, but I also uh, believe that social media kind of gives you a warped point of view, and the way the algorithms are set up. You're only if spend a little too much time on a certain video or listening to a certain person, then they're going to feed you more of that because they want to keep you on
Yeah.
their platform.
Right,
So
and they don't just feed you the same thing. They try to bump it up a notch too. It's
right.
like, oh, you like this? Oh, you'll really love this.
Hmm.
And they just kind
Hmm.
of reinforce any other things that thoughts or feelings that you might be having.
And I think it's too late. Um, they've now started trying to regulate what people say on social media, and this is misleading information. But I think that's a little too late, because by the time they started doing that, people have been indoctrinated with whatever rabbit hole they went down.
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
And so they've been doing this, having this done for years and years. And so I feel like I appreciate them, fact checking what people are saying. And you don't want to feel like Big Brother is watching, but you do have to kind of monitor people's. Something has to be done to regulate or to watch what people are saying on social media. Not necessarily regulate it, but watch when
Yeah.
somebody says something weird. That should flag uh,
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
and let
Hmm.
I,
somebody know, hey, you might want to keep an eye on this person.
Right.
exactly. I do think sometimes that it's a forum for anonymity. So sometimes if you respond to someone else, someone doesn't like your response, and they'll just go after you with, something negative or something going on the other way. And you may say, I'm not going there. And so I just delete and don't respond to that anymore. And just delete, and not responding. And that's when you get all these messages because you happen to open the wrong door. And then you're getting all these negative messages. I mean, look at that channel. We know that channel, Fox News, is ridiculous. And Murdoch, this Australian, owns that. And he's just so I don't watch Fox News at all, and perhaps I should. I don't need to hear the other point of view because I think it's just awful. But sometimes our regular network news can be also blamed. I mean, and this was pointed out, it's a very small one, you've already probably heard that, like when the 18-year-old black person was called a male was called a man, whereas the one in Buffalo was called a teenager.
Mm.
And
Right.
those little things, prejudice set in. And the one in Buffalo was a terrorist, a racist, and it took a while for that to be called out. So those kind of things perpetuate this culture that we're happen to in, where we are so divided. I think culture, social media has a point involved in it, and I think the network has involved in it. And I think we should be looking at different avenues for get our messages. Like, I mean, of course, I'm a New York Times person and MSNBC, but I think still sometimes you need other points of view to figure out what's important, except Fox News.
But I think
There are exceptions.
That's right.
to that point, as much as social media creates community and we find community on social media, I think you may have said it earlier, Gloria. One of you said it. It is also a way to detach. You can detach yourself from
Mm-hmm.
people as well, because you get into this world and you feel like you have all the audacity
Yeah.
behind your keyboard.
Yeah.
We become keyboard thugs on social media. We have and people have all the audacity. There's anonymity too, so because you just because your name is whatever it is on social media, that you can be whoever you want on
Right.
social
That's
media,
right.
and it's a way to detach. And I think that goes back to what we talked about earlier, um, that we are desensitized because we are so disconnected uh, from actual human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, I'm dropping another little nugget I found when I was looking up some stuff. So 65% of Republicans feel that what was it the term like discrimination against white people is quote a big problem. So that's the reinforcement that they're getting through social media or Fox News and all these other types of media. Like yeah, like we're the ones being discriminated against, right? And so this was like right after the shooting. So these are the little nuggets that gets implanted into these actually young people's brains
Mhm.
that grow into, as some of them unfortunately grows into something like what we've seen in Buffalo. But that's
Yep.
who
Yeah.
who knows when this young man in Buffalo, when he started believing some of the things that he was believing,
Oh, the
about
replacement theory. Yeah.
the replacement
Nonsense. Yeah.
theory and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But it's if 65% of the right believes that, that's probably about what a third of the country
Right.
believes that white people are being discriminated against. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so they feel under attack. So
Yep.
I don't know. We got
Ridiculous.
a lot of layers here.
Well, because they've heard that what the brown and black people are majority will be the majority, and by what was it said before 2025, and so then they take that fact, and then they make that be being replaced. So have more
Mm-hmm.
babies. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Ridiculous. Yeah. But
yeah,
somehow they pulled onto that, and it just feeds whatever need that they have. Maybe someone's attending to me, someone's listening to me, and that just feeds that.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about the arming teachers, but what do you guys think about just the concept of just arming ourselves or arming teachers, or how do if we look at it from a defensive standpoint? I got to be honest. Like I never owned a gun before, never really felt the need to, but the thoughts definitely crossed my mind in the recent, the last couple of weeks that who knows? You just never know. And not that I'm always going to have a gun on me or whatever, but I've definitely thought about, maybe I need to follow suit here and recognize what's going on in the world. Anybody else have any thoughts about potentially turning to use to arm themselves?
I have been thinking about it honestly for the last couple years. I hate guns. Like I think like I'm scared of them. Like like I feel like I mean, they're here to kill. Um, and I don't necessarily feel like I need that type of power. However, um, because I live in America, I, I feel the need to protect myself. And it's a gun is not anything that I've ever wanted, but like now, my parents have guns now. Like my dad is like I tell him my dad is like the nicest person you ever want to meet, but like he felt the need to have a gun. Um, my mom has a gun, and like she is taking classes on how to use it because just existing in America, you feel like the need to protect yourself. You can't just live and go on about your business. Like you have to be on guard. Like you have to be heightened, have a heightened sense of awareness all the time in America. And so I don't have one because again, I don't like them. I also have to consider that I have a kid in the house, and he likes guns.
Sure.
He likes, the idea of guns, like they're just fun to him.
Yeah, I mean that's normal. That's normal. You know,
Yeah.
So I go back and forth, and I haven't made it. I don't know that I will ever make a decision on getting one or not, but I definitely have thought about it.
I haven't thought about it. I don't know what my children, how they feel about it. I have a son who's a policeman, so, he has guns. And he carries his guns when he needs to. When he flies here, of course, he would tell the people on the plane that he's carrying his weapon. We grew up with, for children, no, you don't play with guns. You don't do that. Trying to. But I don't know if I know how to use a gun. As I said before, I was a part of, when I was in college, I don't know, maybe it was NRA. I have no idea. I mean, I took classes, learned how to shoot from the hip, learned how to shoot prone, learned how to shoot targets, and I'm pretty good at it. But I haven't had that a gun in a while. I don't know if I want one because if you're going to have one, you need to know how to shoot it. So I applaud your mom in taking lessons to how to do that. Would I use it? Would I be too afraid to hurt somebody? I don't know. I don't know. And I've thought about having a gun, but maybe that's something I'll discuss with my kids. What do they think about it? I don't know.
I'm the same. I'm like Rashina. I don't like guns. Like I'm afraid of them. So,
I'm afraid of you
oh,
having a gun. So
and to your point, Gloria, I would probably be too scared to use it, even if I had
not
to.
everybody
Right.
needs one.
So,
Get you some mace.
Exactly.
Use
That's what
pepper
I
spray, right?
say.
Yeah,
Right.
I have a taser. Like I feel like
yeah,
I'm good.
yeah.
I don't want to kill you. I just want you to leave me alone.
This is
Right?
somebody that won't swat a fly, like literally scared to swat a fly. So no need to have a gun in her hand. Um, okay, one last thought here before we wrap up. I know we're getting close on time. The role of the school resource officer has been in the spotlight both in Uvalde and what was it the other one in Florida,
Park,
Park
Park,
Park
Parkland.
Parkland
Okay.
Elementary,
Mhm.
where both times basically the school resource officer either that was there failed, or here we there was some talk about this heroic school resource officer that never actually was there, and even when the police got there they still obviously failed by not actually intervening on time, which brings into question as to the value of the school resource officer. I know as you, some of you may know, that I was involved in a lot of advocacy to take school resource officers out of the school, or at least to limit their interactions with kids because they have a disproportionate negative impact on African American youth. A lot of times, getting them arrested for or charged with things that they should necessarily be charged with. But this whole atmosphere right now actually seems like it's pushing school resource officers, or the emphasis to put more police into schools, in that direction. So just wanted to kind of get your thoughts as to, like, the arc of this school resource officer story. Where are we heading with this?
I mean, it's in theory, it sounds good. However, again, because I live in America and I have a black son, uh,
Mm,
I don't want people having guns around him that would unconsciously or consciously perceive him as a threat. And
Mm.
that makes me nervous to send my child to school with somebody who is, if he blinks wrong, then he's going to be a hashtag. So for me, I don't know that I feel safer when my kid going to school with a police officer standing at the door. I've myself had run-ins with the school police officers when I was in school. Um, they were just overly violent for no reason. Like, why are you grabbing me? Um, but like my dad, like, and I come from a small town in North Carolina, so we knew a lot of the police officers, and so I had an encounter with one of them. My dad had to go set him straight
mm,
because I wasn't doing anything, but you felt the need to grab my arm and tell me whatever to try to set me straight. And it wasn't. and it wasn't, I will say that it wasn't a white officer, it was a black officer. So I just, policing in general for me is a touchy subject. So I don't know that I trust teachers to have guns around my child, or you know other police officers to have guns around my child, because you you perceive him as a threat.
Yeah.
So for me, that I have mixed feelings on it. And then to me, the Uvalde situation didn't help, because those cops were
Didn't do anything.
completely,
That just kind of showed just how,
just
yeah,
Useless.
completely inept.
even they're scared.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
They had no clue. They were completely clueless as to how to resolve this situation, and so that made me even less comfortable with
And they were trained.
Yeah.
right.
They were
Yeah.
armed. They were
They were
trained on how
armed,
to do
trained,
this.
and
The
just waiting
chief
for
was
orders.
trained how to do
Stupid.
this, and still, when it happened, they were
Yeah.
still like deer in the headlights.
Right.
Yeah.
You fumbled it. Like, so that doesn't make me comfortable. That doesn't make me want to, have um, an officer around my child. And
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't think there should be, if there are police officers in the building, should have no contact with students. I don't think that would be their role. So if you need to have students, people to intervene, you have a counselor, not a police officer.
Right.
And I mean, I think sometimes teachers would go toward the police office for discipline problems, and that should not be their role. So I don't mind if there were police officers. Well, I guess from my experience, we had police officers, retired DC police officers, who had weapons. I had no idea that they carried weapons because they were concealed. But I found out later that they did have weapons. I felt very good about that. They didn't intervene with the children at all. They were stationed at the front. There were two. And they were just there. They were friendly. They said hi to the kids, and the kids loved them. But I didn't know they had weapons. But we found out later they did, when there was a need because of who was visiting our school at that particular time. But they didn't. Their role was not to deal with kids. So if I don't think you should have a resource officer that's dealing with students. That should not be their role. Their role is to protect the school when the need is, and that's what I think. I would be in favor of that, but no involvement with students at all.
Yeah, and some schools have school resource officers and security guard. Like, why do you need both? You don't. I don't feel like there's a need. I mean, you don't need to have security guards and school resource officers. To your point, the discipline issues should be handled by either the administration, counselors, teachers, etc. But you have security on
Yeah.
staff to handle the security issues.
Exactly.
So the school resource officers, in my opinion, should not be interacting with the students.
Right. I agree.
They should
I
be there
agree
for
completely.
security issues, life or death type issues, only.
Yeah. I
But that's
agree.
not happening.
right.
Yeah, and I feel like these types of incidents unfortunately make it harder to make that argument, because it's such an emotional time, and we all understand the it's such an emotionally charged thing. People like, just throw as much security there as possible, not understanding the other side effects that
Yeah.
come along with that
Well,
decision.
and the other thing too, I've heard where there was, might have been Trump that actually said this about let's build a I don't think he said wall, but something similar to a wall. He said let's build a fence. I think he said, around these schools, and let's have armed officers so you're sending kids to school and like they're going to a war
Like a
zone.
gun pack.
Right?
Yeah.
Think about the trauma that child, like elementary school kids or even high school kids, going to school with huge fences and like they're going to a prison or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
That is not
That's not the answer.
something that we should be doing. That's not a direction we should be heading into.
I agree totally.
Oh.
So I automatically discounted after
Right.
that.
Definitely wasn't going
Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. We're out of time. This is obviously a very important conversation, very multi-layered issue that really needs to be tackled from all sides. And we're only just scratched the surface on this issue, but I thought it was a very rich conversation, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time to partake in it. So we're going to continue the discussion, and hopefully we'll get some feedback from some of the public as to some of the thoughts, and we're going to make sure we even the pessimists like me, we still got to make sure we vote. We still have to make sure we advocate for the right things. We still have to make sure that we take part in the system, because maybe I'm wrong. But we got to keep trying. We got to keep trying. Got to keep hoping. So until next time, take care, y'all.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.